So whether we're in After Effects and we're establishing, go ahead and launch my After Effects for that. But whether we're working in After Effects and we're working with our compositions in After Effects, we can set them to always make sure they're 1920 by 1080. But also in Photoshop, remember last week, we can also go create new. Film and video.
I have a question.
Yes.
For the project, what frame rate would you recommend in After Effects?
Well, typically, you always want to work at, because we're working with digital video, you can see, I'm in the After Effects, okay. Yeah, so if I come here and I say film and video and new, okay, I have Photoshop rather, I'm sorry. After Effects, there we go. But if we were going to start fresh, brand new in After Effects, we go new composition, and then we can choose the 1920 1080, which is HDV 1080. And the general rule is, good. When you work with certain film compression types, whether they come from a cell phone camera or online or whatever, you're going to get 30 frames per second. You may get 24 or 25 frames per second. You might get, different frame rates. The general rule of working in digital content, regardless, is 30. Okay, the 24 frames per second is a world of film, even though there's still a lot of software and a lot of formats like even like Maya and 3D and all that stuff typically lets you work at 24. The truth is, all digital video is in fact 30 frames per second, but the 2997 is the most common compression rate. So the only real difference here is, do you want to work with a whole number or work with decimals? That's pretty much it. You're not going to notice much of a difference. So I generally like to just work at a rounded off number of 30 while I'm working, but be aware the second you encode this out, the second you send this as a MPEG-4 video or compress it for the streaming on the web or whatever, it could very well drop that down in the compression type when you render it at 24997 or even 23976, different formats for different services. So again, a lot of stuff that you're going to find maybe direct streaming online without any download is probably going to be very, very lower frame rate. So it'll be down there in that 24, 23. But the general rule is all digital video is 30. When it comes to streaming video, now you're losing quality. You're giving up some frame rate. So that's just kind of the golden rule there, is if you're work at a 30, and you can set that up. Similarly, like I said, when we're in Photoshop and we create new, go with the format we need, HDTV 1080, 1920 1080, and 72. When you create here, it's going to give us our Photoshop file to start working. It even gives us our grid lines here, and if you remember what the grid lines represented, these grid lines are basically the same thing here when we're working. Just make a new composition by default and going to our little options here for title, action, safe. And you can see that is giving us the same kind of grid. And title, action, safe, just in a nutshell, guys, just to talk about now. Okay. What title, action, safe means. We'll just make this be a little larger, heavier, bold. Yeah. Title action safe, what it represents is you never want your titles all the way over outside this boundary. See that? Because what it basically comes down to, let's see if this will actually let me do this. Okay. I'll just make a solid, see if it lets me draw this on the solid. Yeah, see, it won't let me do that unless I'm in layer mode. But I want to make the point here, and I can't really do it here with what I'm working with, but this outer box, this outer gray box represents this thing called action safe. So most important action has to happen inside this box. Because on some screens, and I know you've seen it even in a classroom when the projector is off and some of the content on your projector is cut off because it's not, it's not ratioed properly to the screen. Some of you may have seen, like, again, watching TV shows on your television or cable, sometimes, again, things get cut off. That is simply because they have failed to take into account the action title safe. So even though, even though I can take this type and put it down there, don't ever do that. You want your titles to stay inside this box here. So whether it's that, okay, so I'll just do it quickly. So again, inside the second box, okay? That is the title safe zone, right inside there. Don't ever put it down below here because it might very well get cut off. And you, like I said, you can watch commercials on TV and they'll give you the phone number. And because the ad was made, not made in HD format, but they're scaling it up to fit HD, the phone number gets cut off. It's just really sloppy. And we have giant screens. So always make sure your title stays inside. And the title basically means any words, any information that needs to be read, anything of value. Keep it inside that second boundary box. All right. Let's go to new project. So let's walk us through the whole process here. So again, the specs of the project basically is you need to have a spoken word, a dialogue, an audio file. Now, before I ever really get going here, okay? Let's go to my desktop here. I like to work like this, and I'm just going to come here. New folder. Okay, so I have a new folder here. And I'm going to go ahead and this is something you can do on your machine at home or on your portable drive or whatever, right? You can actually call this the motion graphics folder. And inside this motion graphics folder, okay, I typically come along. Where'd it go? Let's see here. New folder. You have to forgive me, guys. I do have a little bit of cough today. But I'll come here and I'll break this into the different projects. Project 1, Kinetic Type, right? Make another one, project 2, etc. Project 2 will be opening title. Because After Effects is a production folder. So what it wants to do is it wants to have a central folder with all the proper files in that folder. It's just the best way it works. And then inside this folder, we can create the individual folders, such as audio files. We'll say PSDs for comps. Boy, excuse me. We can come here and say After Effects comps. And again, we're just making a file for everything we need. Boy. All right, so now we can propagate and get what we need here. Now I said before, spoken word, dialogue, conversation, vocal speech, whatever, minimum 30 seconds. Well, how do we get a hold of that? Well, I've had people in the past record their own, but you can also go online and you can find a dialogue or something like that. So let's just come in here. Not really important to hear the audio yourself right now. Oh, come on. And again, you can use movie lines. You can use stand-up comedy, famous speeches. Let's find a better one.
I was careful.
Let's see.
I was careful. I should have done this.
That's too boring, too slow. Right, but you get the idea. You can easily find a dialogue. All right, so let's use this one. Okay. So we're talking about 2 minutes in on this clip. So how do we get this off of YouTube? Well, we can highlight the URL up at the top and Control-C to copy it. And then find your typical everyday YouTube to MP3 converter. Now be aware some of these do kind of try to manipulate you and get you to download stuff. Typically, you just have to paste. So I just Control-V to paste it. Convert now. And I'm going to try to avoid any pop-ups it gives me, and I'm not going to install anything. I'm just looking for a small little MP3 download here. There are other sources, obviously. You saw when I did that YouTube to MP3, there's tons and tons and tons of places. Just be aware that there's a lot of clickbait stuff associated with it. Okay? So here it is right here. That's going to be right down. Start download. Close that. I don't want that. You're going to see it's going to start giving me all kinds of pop-ups. And you see there it is now downloading it. So just be aware, don't install anything. Just use the free service. So it's going to download. This you can see what's going to be in the download folder. Right? I'm going to get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. All right. So I know that's in the download folder. There it is. Just going to cut it out of the download. Go back to my desktop folder, which I just created. Motion graphics, project 1 Kinetic Type, audio files, and paste it. And if I want to, I might even want to rename it. I'll name something like source audio. Okay, so I have my source audio. I double check and verify that it works. And I know in about 2 minutes is the clip. Alright, so we got the file ready to go. Now, this is the best practice to work with. Now, first things first, let's get the audio into After Effects so we can look at the audio wave, trim it down to what we want. Now, I can either import file. I can right-click in the project file here, import file, or I can just click and drag it in. I'm just going to right-click, import file, desktop, motion graphics, kinetic type, audio file, source audio. Import as footage. All that means if it imports as footage is it'll be one layer, which again is different than what we want when we want to import, let's say, our PSD compositions. It's imported, and now I can drag it down here. Now that I've dragged it down into my actual timeline, you're going to notice we're still not going to see anything here, right? And that's because there's nothing to be seen. It is only audio. But then I know if I roll up here to about 2 seconds, 2 minutes rather, this is about where it starts. Now, this is where it helps kind of open up our audio file waveform. So where we can see the beginning and the ends of files. Now you notice when I rub through or scrub through here, I'm not hearing any audio. This is because in order to hear audio scrubbing back and forth like Premiere Pro would do, we have to hold in the Control key. But I'm pretty certain that my clip is going to start here. I'll just hit the space bar. Okay, so right there you see, this clip pretty much lasts from here to here. Now I can trim this down by just going to the beginning and dragging up to it. And going to the end and dragging back to that. So I have just my about 30-second clip here. Now I can drag this all the way to the beginning and get it lined up at 0. Ready to go. And this tells me that, yeah, the ending here is actually, in fact, 30:04. So let's go into composition settings. Make sure that the duration is now set to 30 seconds. And the 04 represents 4 frames out of 30. I can even go back to a full round number of 30 there. See? And I'm doing a 1920 by 1080. And you see the name of the comp is actually source audio because that is the name of the file I brought in. So now we can see it. I can even, if I want to here, boost it a little bit, just so it's a little bit easier to see the wave.
You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature. I will not be bullied by that. Here we go.
All right. So here we pretty much have it ready to go. Now, before I even get started here, I might as well go ahead and save this. Save as this composition. Find the correct folder, go to desktop, type, and I'll save this into my After Effects comp. And I'll just name this something like Kinetic Type comp. Maybe I'll give it a number like 01, just so I can keep track, meaning this is the very first file to be working in the composition now. Now that I've got this, I could use this file right here to start doing some of my Kinetic Type. Because like I said, I do have the ability of using text tool here and using text tool to do kind of crazy things and just type the text and animate the text. But I want to show you again back to that old school way, or the safer, simpler kind of way of doing it by using, say, Photoshop to create the comps. Now, again, like I did before, just close that out to show you again. I simply went create new, film and video, HDTV 1090, 20, 1080. I can even say this to have, no background or a transparent background or a black background. Really doesn't matter right here. And I can even give it a first name like my phrase 01 or my line 01 or shot 01 or tart 01, whatever I want to call it here, I can do that. Hit create. And again, it gives me my 1920 1080, and it gives me these little grid lines. Now, go ahead and make a new layer to start creating, just to show you that we can always get rid of that black background, because that background is in fact a layer. A layer we probably don't want eventually, but at least it'll help us see our content. All right, so let's now, we got the phrase 01 or shot 01, or what did I call this, part 01 here. And let's figure out what we want to break down into the phrases here. All right, so there's essentially one big roar there. Hey, right here, roar, right? And you can see where the sound peaks is generally where the sound first comes in. So yeah, I could come over to Photoshop here and just go roar or whatever, right? Or this might be a great case here to just use text tools, information tools here inside of After Effects. So I'm going to go ahead and do it because it's one big roar. Okay, I'm going to grab the text tool. Let me go ahead and turn on my action type to save just to have them. R, A, A-A-A-H-H-H-A-H-R-R-R. Something like that, right? Just a big RAR. Go down here, check out paragraph settings, get that set up properly. Start to think about things in the character here, such as what font. We want a font that is easy to read. We want a font that is, we get it inside that action title safe, that's that inner box. All right, and you can see here even, I can say, I only want this text to start there, where it comes on, and I only need this text to last a certain amount of time. That's a pretty long screen here, right about there is where it ends. And then I can think about, okay, well, how do I want this RAR to actually happen? Well, I could have just appear and disappear. I could animate it in, animate it out. Remember, when we deal with, with layers here, we can do all kinds of basic transforms on a layer. Position, scale, rotation, opacity. We've also got some interesting effects that play with a lot of those. Or we can come over to these effects and presets, animation presets, find the text animation presets. And here we have things like animate in, animate out, blur, curves, spins, expressions, all these different pre-made animatable capabilities here. Okay, maybe I'll find one here. I'm looking for one that's kind of, again, loud and shouty. Here's one called Quiver. I wonder if that would be. Let's just drop that one. Now, wherever this blue marker is where this effect is going to start. And you see now it will add that into an animate capability here under the text. Okay, and it's basically doing a wiggle randomize to this. Okay. So you see now it's going to come on and RAR and RAR. Now I can increase the amount of that. And add more key factors to this. Okay. Because you see it's got scale involved, it's got skew, it's got opacity. So let me just come here to scale. And in the middle here, let's add scale factor to it. Okay. Back to okay. So I just exaggerated the scale. So let's hear just this one text, one word, timed out. Okay. Now, when we're done hearing a word, or when the phrase is over, it kind of finishes about here. Then we need to think about how is this going to exit the screen? Because he's done saying it, right? One word, rar, and now right about here, there's some crashes and some bangs. So what am I going to do with this? Am I just going to have it fade away? Well, maybe that's what I want to do here. So let's just do that. Let's come here, transform, opacity. I'm going to have it slowly fade away. Better yet, watch this even cooler. Animate, blur. Key the blur there that I just added to the animate for the text. And I'm going to have that blur as well. So not only is it, see, opacity, it's also blurring. Okay. Let's see what this all looks, just this one word.
The blur effect, is that, do you need to drag something onto it, or was it just there? Kind of.
It's built into, whenever you make a text, you have all these additional animators that you can add to your text. They're built in, and it's built in blur by character as opposed to if I were to just use an effect of blur, which would blur the whole layer. So you can control each character in the blur. I don't know if you noticed that in the blur. See, range selector, blur, is currently locked. Even then, I can add certain properties to that blur, even expressions and wiggles and so on, just to how that blur is being applied. Like right now, I actually have it, you can see here. Shift set. You can see here that it's currently, they're linked. What if I unlink them? And tell this maybe the height one to be 0. So you see now I'm only blurring on the horizontal, see?
Yeah, I see.
Okay, so you could always add more and more and more to this. Something else I'm going to do to this, just because I can. Let me decrease that transform. I'm going to come over here though, because I kind of like this showy kind of earth shaking. Okay, there is a wiggle. So I'm just going to type in the word wiggle here. I'm going to go wiggle position and drag that onto. Okay, and what that wiggle position you see here gives me, see that's now an effect called wiggle that does wiggles per second or speed and an amount. So I'm going to say speed 0, amount 0, key at the beginning. I'm then going to have it increase 5 and 20. About 3/4 of the way in, and then have it, of course, fade back to 0 and 0. So now, not only is the individual characters wiggling by using that text effect, but the entire layer is going to wiggle now. Watch. So it gives you that, it almost could be even more extreme there. Let's see. Yeah, let's do it even more extreme. All right, so doing single words are very easy to do here using just the After Effects because you have all this additional controls over, what you want to do to it. But when it comes to full-on phrases, okay, so even here, right here, he says the word enough.
Enough! You all of you beneath me.
All right, enough. Did he just say enough once?
Enough! You all of you beneath me.
Enough. You are all of you beneath me. This is where we can use our little Photoshop. Okay? And this is where I'm just going to say, all right, let's just grab the text tool here in Photoshop. And enough. Now this will help, of course, to know when we were over here. What was our font? Vertigo Upright 91. Okay. So come here, find that font, try to match it. Now, do you have to use the exact same fonts? No, you could use different fonts, especially if they're 2 different characters. But remember, we don't want to use all fonts. Let's see, Vertigo Upright 91 was the point. Okay. And of course, I'm going to make the color be white just so it pops against the black here. And central Enough. Whoops. Go away. Let's try this again. Enough. Okay. So one word. Put it in the meta layer. You are all of you against me, or you are all of you beneath me. So then I'm just going to make it be you are all. So each text layer gets a different, each word rather gets a different layer of shift. Just send it that. You are all of another you. That there, looks good. Beneath me. You could lay these out any way you want to here. Right? You could do them sideways. Actually, kind of like this here. You just kind of rearrange and make a nice little layout. Just make a good clean layout, and because what I'm doing here is I'm figuring out this is what I want it all to look like when it's all assembled on screen. So now I can come here, save this as, save to my folder I just built, Motion Graphics, Kinetic Type, PSDs for comps, Part 01, save. Just as a PSD. Now in After Effects, I can come in to my project. So if you can't find the project, there it is there. Now I'm going to import in my PSD for comp, part 01. It'd be very, very important to not click, do not have sequence on. So if I have part 01, part 02, part 03, it's going to automatically activate the sequence. We don't want a sequence. We want the individual file, and we want it as a composition retained layer size, not footage. This will allow us to import it. Hit OK. And you see it gives us a folder with all the layers. We don't want that. We want the composition it automatically builds called part 01. Simply double click it. And you see now it has brought them in as all of its layers, but it also brought it in at 3004, which is what the settings were for this. Well, how long does this need to be? Okay, so that's going to go from here, 810.
You all of you beneath me.
Okay, to about 11:29. So 8, 9, 10, 11, about 5 seconds is what we really need here. Because it actually only starts right about there. So if this only needs to be 5 seconds, we'll composition setting it. Take it down, do again the 5 seconds it needs to be. Okay. So now it also brought in the background. Now remember, we will eventually won't need that background, so I can get rid of it because in After Effects, the background by default is black. So don't forget to turn off that background. I'm also going to need to borrow this little bit of audio file here that's just this part of the dialogue. Now to do that, I could simply copy this and paste it into there, but then I'd have to hunt it down. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to duplicate it with this one selected here, okay? Not the one on top, not the one that I'm looking at the waypoint, but the one on top. I can split it to cut the beginning off. Go to the end as long as it needs to be to about there. Okay, select it again, split it again. So I have just a little piece of audio here that I need. But this is what's really important. Before I cut this or remove this, I need to move it all the way back to the beginning in time here. So that now I can select it, cut it, find our part one, and paste it. Okay? And it knows where to line it up in the pasting. So you can see where I can even kind of give it a little bit more time, open it up, and see our waveform. All right, and now.
Enough! You are all of you beneath me. I am a god. Enough! You are all of you beneath me. I am a...
You see, it's actually much shorter than this. It's actually about 4 seconds. Okay, so what do we say, 5? Let's shorten it even 4. All right. Now it's just an issue of having these things appear on screen as they're being spoken. Now, I'm going to show you a shortcut way to kind of do that, okay? By simply selecting all the text. I have all the text selected now. Opening up the first one, opening up the transform, and keying position. Now that is at 009, 9 frames. Let's go back 4 frames. Let's go back 5 frames. Okay? 5 frames. Now we're at 004. And now I'm going to think, how do I want these words to reveal themselves? I've already set a key for where I want them to be when they're located here. Now I have to think about how are they going to appear on screen. So maybe enough will fly from the bottom. Maybe the U will fly in from the left. Maybe the R flies in from the right. The all, whoops. The all will fly in from the right. The of, see, I'm just stacking them up here. U. Beneath me. Okay, so it's just a short way of just quickly animating them all on screen at once. Okay? But the problem is now I need to offset the actual layers. So I know the word enough needs to be on screen right here. Enough. Okay, let's hit the space bar. Okay, you needs to be here. So I'm going to take the word you. Which one is it? Not that one. This one. This one needs to be on screen. See, so I'm just going to line up that second key when it needs to be in screen right here. Now, another cool way to do this is if I just click on the blue timeline bar here and hold Control at the same time. It tells me exactly where the next word would be, which is right there, R. Okay. U. Let's find the word R. So now the R is going to stop at second mark, right where I'm at, right there. Okay. mark, so it's at that point in time. All, and then of. Let's see. So of is about there, because he's kind of saying of. You can almost see the peak of you as he says it. So again, if you aren't quite sure when things are to appear or not to appear, or do you want to be ahead of the word, behind the word, you generally want to see it before you hear it, because speed of light is faster than the speed of sound. So it's just like, again, when you see an explosion and then there's a few seconds, then you hear it, just be aware that you generally want to see that even with you when you're dealing with this. Now here's that next U, which was actually that next little bump right there. That one to hit there. And I'm just moving that second mark. So that's pretty much beneath right there. Let's go ahead and move its second key, see, to that mark. So really, when you actually use the waveforms to control the timing of things, that's me. Okay. Finally, the me, and I'll have that mark hit there. So again, this is probably the easiest way to kind of, like I said, go through and get the base timing of it done. The base time. So you can do this through the whole project, then go in and find certain words that are more dynamic. Let's check out the time.
Enough! You all of you beneath me.
See?
Enough! You all of you beneath me. Enough! You all of you beneath me.
Okay. Now, what other cool things we can do here while we've got this in this letter? Right? Well, we can turn on the motion blur, which is this three little dots with these three little circles here. And motion blur is pretty cool because you can see now these things are going to blur when they come in. Just make sure that it's activated here. Another cool thing to deal with is, excuse me, is the principle of easy in, easy out, or smooth in, smooth out, so that the general idea is that things don't move in a straight line, continuous speed. They speed up and they slow down. Well, to do that, we can actually go ahead and open up all these again. There's a couple ways to do this. One way would be to, select which has keys on it and switch to the graph editor, highlight those keys, and then just hit this button here called Easy Ease. And you see that gives us a Bezier curve instead of a linear curve. So this will now move in and come to a slow stop instead of a continuous speed. You can also do that by selecting the keys here, right-click, and choosing Easy Ease. And as you see, they turn into little hourglass-looking things. See? So it's pretty easy. Right-click, Easy Ease. And I just think that gives us much smoother, animated kind of movement. And it's just easier to kind of just select these guys, right click. And tell it to be easy is then maybe going into that graph editor, but you can see it's doing the same thing. Just notice that your little diamond-shaped keys are now turned into little hourglass keys. Okay. Let's see what this looks like.
Enough! You all of you beneath me. Enough! You all of you beneath me.
All right. So we got nice little good job here on phrase number part 1. Now let's go back to our source audio file here. And all I need to do is take the part 01 up here in the upper left project folder, drag it down, and sort of line it up where it needs to be. Now, temporarily, we can actually use the waveform in our part 01 to line up to, right? We can use this audio file to line up to our master audio file, which is about, let's see, should be about there. No, beginning there. So you can see how these are perfectly aligned now. See, even where it peaks there at the end. However, I don't need, I'll get a weird stereo effect if I keep this. So I can actually turn off the audio for that part 01 because I don't need it because it exists here. Let's see what we got so
You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature. I will not be bullied by that.
All right. Yes. You can see now how that works in the timing. Now, I could, add some like more crushing sound effects. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I could put in here, grunts, smash, bang, other things that can kind of be, it's not the greatest clip to use because it just has all these sound effects in it. But let's just keep going.
You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature.
I am a god, you dull creature. Okay. Let's bounce back over here. All right? I. Now I can change these however I want. Am. A. God. You. Dull. Is it dull creature? Creature. Right. I could use them. Now, how do I want this to be arranged? Watch this. Let's have some fun with this. I am a. Whoops. Too big. We have lots of fun making this however we want. Changing up the layout. Change it anyway, have the words, we can have horizontal, we can have sideways. Really doesn't matter here. Everything I need here is 120. Right? Looks good to me. File, save as. What will this be? This will be part 02. Save. And now we can go over to After Effects. Let's go ahead and bring in part 02. That is again a file import, right-click import, or a drag in. Part 2, do not choose sequence and choose composition to get the layers. Hit open, okay. Now we can double-click part 02 comp. Where again, this only needs to be probably a few seconds here. Let's see how long does it need to be. It needs to go from here.
I am a god, you dull creature.
Okay. So just a few seconds. Now watch what I'm going to do now. Instead of duplicating this and cutting and pasting and all that stuff, I'm going to go to part 01. Okay. And I'm going to copy, just edit and copy the audio from part 01. Come over to part 02, edit and copy, write it and paste it. Okay.
Enough! You are all of you beneath me.
All right, well, I don't need that part, so I can lop that much off. What I want is all that goes on after that. So from the end, expanded. So I now get this.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be. I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be.
All right, so we really don't need all this extra, but I'm going to leave it. So now again, it's a question of timing and animating. Okay, get rid of the background, delete the background again. I'm just going to do, I'm a god, you dull creature. Same process I did before. Open it up, transform, position. That's at 10 frames. Go back 5 frames. Okay? I am a, slide that from the bottom. Flash from the right, flash from the bottom. Okay, so this is now going to come in like that. Now it's an issue of just timing. So here he says, I
am a god.
So the word I has to be there. Am needs to be right there. Just nudge it, nudge it, nudge it until you get the key to be. A. Sometimes it can be tough when they're slamming their words together, right? Because he's saying I am a. He's not saying I am a. He's saying I am a. Which is pretty funny. It's not very godlike. Here's the word God. Have that keyframe hit right there.
God, you dull creep.
This is the U. Let's hold Control and C. Yep, that's U.
Dull.
Doll. There.
Creature.
Creature. Once again, we can come here and turn on the motion blurs. Right? We could easily grab a hold of these keys and do that again, easy ease, just to make for nicer, smoother motions of the movements. Just to give us a better effect. Got it. Not a lot of fancy. I'm not really doing a whole lot with too many fonts. I'm not doing too much with too much color. I'm just focusing on text, layout, and timing. It's pretty much all I'm focused on now to get as much of it done as possible.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be. I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be. I am a god.
Okay, now let's go back to our source audio here. This is part 2 we just finished. This is part 2 in our composition. Let's move it over here to time it out. Let's open up the audio file waveform so we can sync it up. So right now it looks like this peak just a little bit off from the original state. So what I gotta do is just nudge that back a little. And you see they're now lined up, but now I'm gonna go turn off the audio so I don't get a weird stereo kind of feel. Let's see how this does.
You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by you.
Okay. Now, as we start to bring in these, see, eventually they need to go away, right? Well, this one, I had this one kind of fade away. But some other ways we can have this kind of fade away or move. I could have this fly off screen. I could have it fade and blur like I did with the first one. Point is when that phrase is done, it needs to go away before the next one comes. So an easy way to kind of think about that, or a better way to think about that, is I'm going to talk about the use of what's called 3D layering. Usually don't like to talk about it. You see a lot of these, though, animate in and out this way. And 3D layering is simply coming over here. So we already know where the motion blurs are, right? Those are the motion blurs. But the far right side here is a little cube, and these control the 3Ds. Okay, that gives us now X, Y, and Z. And what I can do with that, if I just start with part 01, and I open up just the transform node, you can see I get X, Y, and Z, position, scale, and rotation. For me, I kind of like playing around with rotation. And that means what I can do is have this kind of roll away or rotate out of the frame, almost like a page of a book. But you see, I can use rotate Y axis. I could do a rotate X axis. The problem, of course, you're seeing is that the anchor point needs to be moved. So if I move the anchor point down to the bottom, I can then replace this where it needs to be on screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this, when it's all said and done with this phrase, right, because the audio file says it's pretty much done there, I'm going to go with a rotate X key. And then right before the next one comes on here, I'm going to rotate this back. So it's kind of falling back out of the frame. Okay, I can even do that here with the
God, you dull creature.
see, even right here. This one, I'm going to do a little roll away as well. Transform. Let's do a Y rotate. But then again, I also need to again affect the anchor point. Because if I wanted to rotate out, I have to move the anchor point offset. Okay. Let's get this here to rotate out. See? So now you see that they're using the individual nested comps here to animate it all coming together, but in the source file where they overlap is where I'm going to animate away.
You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by you.
All right, now we're getting into the last phrase, the next phrase here, and I will not be bullied.
And I will not be bullied by you.
I will not be bullied by All right, let's do one more. And will not be bullied by a okay. Let's get rid of the here. All right, so now how are we going to write it? Right? And I not just trying to rearrange this here, and I will not be bullied have some fun here with the sizes again, right? Maybe play around with color, you know. Yeah, why not? Let's have some fun with bully. Why not? Right? Okay. Doesn't get to quite finish his sentence there. So here I have another little phrase. Go ahead and save that again. This is what we'll call part 03. Jump over to After Effects again. I'll import file, part 3, not a sequence, but as composition. Ready? Double click the part 3 comp, not the folder. And I can jump back to part 2. Grab the audio file. Copy. Go to part 3. Paste it. Open it up. Now I know already that this is ending about there. And this is the next phrase. Right? Just like that.
I will not be bullied by you. I will not.
Okay. So here it basically starts saying, and I will not be bullied by. Don't need the background. Go ahead and select all these guys like I've done before prior. Open up the key, transform, position, it's at 0.005 or 0.006 frames. Let's go back 5. Okay, and how am I going to have these now appear? And I will not be. I'm going to do something different with the word bullied here. Okay. I'll do this by a. So bullied, I'm going to leave bullied alone. Maybe I'll do something a little more interesting with bullied. Okay. But I do want to at least have some. Okay, maybe I'll pull it down. Just to get the keys so I can time it out. All right. Now it's just figuring out. Okay. So that's and. So he says really quick, and I will. So here's the I. That key. By the way, at any time you can always right click, keyframe assist, easy ease. So you do it while we're going here. Here's Will. Ease. So you can see it's pretty easy to find when the words are actually being spoken. Just line up that second key. B. See, is it B here? Here you can see that little, everywhere you see a little beak. It's pretty much the time of where we need that key to get to. So just like that. Bullied right here. Second key. It's supposed to be easy. Yeah, they have different little icons for different key assistants. Right there, he's saying, he gets cut off just after that. Let's see what these look like or sound like.
I will not be bullied by that.
All right. Now, some other things we can play around here with, like words, like dynamic words like bullied, which have, it's got more meaning than just, so even maybe here I'll start with a scale even and then go huge up and then swing back down to 100 or whatever there, or maybe even less than 100, and then back over a little. And so I'm giving it a little bit more bullied, just a little bit more tension there. Now again, that gives me whole new keys that I can also, again, right-click, keyframe, easy ease. So let's see how I've just changed the word bullied just by scaling it up and down.
I will not be bullied by that. I will not be bullied by that.
So you can see how we can really start to build upon, get these things going for us. All right. So that's our part 03. Go back to our source audio file. Here's part 03. Let's drag part 03 comp now into our settings. Line it up apparently where it needs to go. Look at the waveforms to sync it together. Okay. See where, we can line this up so that the very beginning is with the very beginning. Like that. But then deactivate our audio on that layer so we don't get that stereo feedback kind of duplicate kind of audio. Let's see what we've got.
You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature. I will not be bullied by that. Here we go.
All right. So we're slowly building up now. Of course, you can hear. Remember one of the last things I did here when. right? Activating 3D, figuring out how do I want this to move in or out. I transition the anchor point, replacing centered on, and then I can play around with the X, Y, or Z, see, to rotate it off screen. You're going to find a lot of tutorials that talk about using the 3D layering here too. And that's some keys. I did not say keys. Okay.
Going back.
There. There's that key.
Now, you are all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature. I will not be bullied by you.
Slowly but surely we move along. Now again, if I want to change the colors of these backgrounds at any time, I can easily do that by just, especially on the master, the source audio file here, I can easily do that by, putting a new solid down here, but I can also come over and just, again, make a new composition. It should be 3004, I think the original was. And I can even call this a final output comp, or something like that, something that stands out. And now I'm going to take my source one right here into edit. So now I'm only having to fight with one layer. Okay. And now I can play around with, again, maybe I want to do a new solid for a background. Right. Put that beneath it. I can even come over and put on some interesting effects here. Like, there are stylize, different filters that I can apply to this, generate light beams, lens flare, all this kind of stuff that are out here. If you can't find something, like I'm looking for a gradient. PRKD, here it is here. See, so I can do a gradient ramp, drag that onto the solid, and that'll allow me to do things like, let's do a radio lamp, which will start in the center and go to the outside, but I'll swap them. Let's go ahead and run with original just to soften that up. See, so now I'm using a gradient ramp here to kind of give myself a more interesting background. I can even drop a shadow off all the upper layer here just by, because now it's been nested. Perspective, effect, perspective, drop shadow. You see now every layer on top will have a little bit of a drop shadow to it. Okay. So it'll be easier to read it against that background. What else can I change here? Let me see here. Lead, color. Take this color code here and copy it, 7BF729. Why am I going to do that? Because I want this to be that same color. See, so I can just paste it into the color code. Final output, see, now my final output has that in it. Now, so far, again, I've talked about using, if I can save it if I want to here. We've talked about, working and saving and, working in Photoshop to, create your individual parts or phrases just to get the bulk of them done that way. Talked about, using text and using the text built into After Effects to do this. Timing, getting the most, the bulk of it kind of done this way. Well, what if you did want to add just a little bit more oomph to this? Now, I'm not sure you guys are aware, but in your links, okay, you do have access to an online library. Right here through your links. And in the library, okay, in the resources, we do have access to this source for, see, browse by type, go to video footage, and we do have video blocks. Now, if you launch video blocks, you can only do this when you're logged in through the portal. But you can see here, what do we have? We have footage, backgrounds, After Effects, templates, audio, music, sound effects, photos, vectors, illustrators, just a lot of cool content here that we have for free. None of my other colleges offer this. But here with the Art Institute, we provide you access to all this. So you see, I've got, backgrounds. Let's go to space backgrounds. See? So I could even bring in, these are like videos, After Effects, and different stuff. Now, I'm not really looking for a fancy background here, but I do want to make a point of showing this to you. See, clouds and so on. There's green screen. There's just a lot of cool content here. And that's just in backgrounds. There's also footage. There's full HD and 4K. Just a lot of cool content here. So even if I were to come here and say to the background, say footage, shattering glass or something like that, because there's a lot of that sound, right? You can see I've got, breaking sheets of glass, shattering glass, see? Slow motion, all these kind of neat effects that are in here that I could toss in there or something like that if I wanted to. Or I could add smoke, or something to it. Now, I'm not really looking for this, but I wanted to show you where it is because, see, these are some cool, like right here, that's kind of a cool slow moving blue. Let's go ahead and download that. Again, I don't need, let's do an HD, H.264. I don't need a big heavy file here. Let's just download it. Already, it's downloaded, right? And there's all these neat things that you can add to this. So let's go quickly to the downloads. There it is there. Got that. Back to our desktop. Motion graphics. See, even here, if I wanted to, I can create a file for videos. And let's import that video. Okay. Import its footage, it's called AIDS. Maybe I'll throw it down here in the thing and put it here in this final output comp. And now I've got just a little bit more interesting in the background. Now you're noticing that my buffering though is going much slower now because I've now got to RAM preview all that video. So this is where you might want to turn this down to being a quarter quality.
Now, you all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature, and I will not be bullied by you. Here we go.
All right, so you can add interesting stuff to that. And again, remember, even though that's a video, we can still play around with its blending modes, how it, whether it overlay. So there, it's just a suggestion of it here in the whitest parts. Or we could play with blending modes here. So overlay, maybe multiply, maybe a lighten. And they all affect that background a different way. Just to kind of show you how you can add and access some of this additional resources like this. Which is kind of cool to see that, yeah, we do have all this kind of stuff here. Not to mention sound effects and everything else that I in addition to that, of course, we could also do image searches here So if I said things like hawk texture. Okay. So here I've got this, I just typed in hawk texture. What if I were to take that and save that? I'll just save it in the PSDs for comps. So that even using a JPEG like this, import as footage, that I could drag that down in and have it, see, affect, especially if I were to say in a blending mode. Okay. And now I've got, let's just take that smoke out for a second. But you can see where I've got this now, a hawk kind of texture beneath there.
Enough! You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature. I will not be.
All right, what else can we do here? I'm just kind of thinking and playing around here without, kind of going too far along. Well, what about, Loki's, right? Watch this. Layer, new, whoops. Layer, new, solid. And I'm going to make this be a Loki purple. I'm actually going to copy that code for the other layers. Okay, put that on the top. So everything's purple, but not overlay. Add. Color. Would be a better way to do it this way. Yeah, it's a better way. Right. Because I want to make these whenever Loki's speaking, right? I want to make it so Hawk will be green and Loki will be purple, right? Now, I could very easily select here, and again, I'm in the nested version of these. Effect, color correction, change color, white. Just like that. And now I can make all the white on this layer will now be purple. Then all I need to do is take this value, this changed color, copy it, paste it, see? Paste it. It's interesting, it didn't change the word bully because the bully was not white. Let's go to final output here. And you can see where
Enough! You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature. I will not.
this might be a good time because I made a major change to save it as a different version. And again, we could just keep going and going and going here. Like, I can pick out certain words that I want. Like he said, I am God. Where's that at? Here. Okay, so here's the God layer right here. I am a God. Well, let's go over to the main one where it's now flattened out here. See, I am a God. And I can play around with more effects here, right? So what about generate and light rays? Let's see, light burst, let's do light rays. There we go. You see, it gives me this neat little guy here. And I can say, yeah, right there, at this point in time, right before he says God, okay, this little point's going to be here. The intensity, I'll make it be 0. Key intensity, key center, key radius. God appears. Intensity goes up. Comes across and says God. This will now cross and just kind of highlight the word God. And then I can have it go back to an intensity of 0. So and then let's look at the final output version here. So all I'm doing is just saying, hey, look at this word God.
I'm a god, you dumb creature.
Let it preview through or switch it to a lower quality.
I'm a god, you dumb creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
So you see, all I've done is just done that little light.
I'm a god, you dumb creature,
The light blast.
and I will not be bullied by that.
Just to kind of say, hey, read this. See, so it's got this weird flashing on the word God. Right? So we can go and we can add more dynamic to each text, each layer, the nested versions, the individual older versions like this to have them kind of make weird kind of movements at any particular time. The guy was coming here and when he says the word enough, right here, right? Let's go back to one of these weird effects. Let's go back to this now. Wiggle, right? And wiggle gelatin, wiggle position, wiggle scale. Let's say wigglorama. Put that on the word enough. So right there. Okay. Speed, nervousness, right? Move that rotation down a little bit. Maybe move scale up a little bit. Okay. Key, key, key. Okay, key all those factors at a maximum there. Then in 1 second here, take it all down to 0. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Enter. See? So that's now going to give me a random, see? Enough, right? Like he's shouting.
Enough! You all of you beneath me. Enough! You all of you beneath me.
Let's see what that looks like all the way to the final version.
Enough! You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
There, I kind of like that more.
Enough! You all of you beneath me.
All right. I'm not using that video, am I? Yeah. Let's go ahead and do that. All right. Now I'm still not done here. Okay? What you want to do? I'm going to go one more nesting here. New composition. Okay, and you can call that final output or whatever. You know, kind of. Okay, because I'm going to do one more thing using these wiggles because it's such a violent scene. Bang, 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 and then enough, and everything gets calm. And then everything gets all crazy and wild again, right? Well, what I'm going to do there is go back to my final comp here. go to my composition settings here, and I'm actually going to increase the overall size of the comp here, just so I could take this guy here and scale it up. Right? Why am I doing that? Because I want to fill in all the empty gaps of this now. See, so now you can see I've gone over and it's larger. Because now I'm going to go back to my wigglorama here and apply the wigglorama. You can see why I did a bigger version there, because I want to get rid of those seams. Okay. Let's go with speed of 3, less rotation, nervousness of 2. Scale should be fine. Scale width, all that. Position 25 should be fine. There, see? I want it. Maybe scale should be less than that. Okay. So what I'm going to do at the beginning here is I'm going to key these factors, just like I did before. Key them. RAR, fighting, 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 fighting. Right? Maybe even 2, 2.2, 22. You know, just giving some additional keyframe values here, just to set a second key until he says enough. Whoa. Because enough, I want to turn all these to 0. Okay. And what that tells me now is actually to go back here, just like I did before, make my setting even larger. There we go. Try to get rid of that. I guess it's probably the scale factors. Let's see if there's something else here. 5. Just trying to get to put it up. There we go. I like that. Then when he says enough, everything calms down. And he says, "You're all beneath me. I'm a god, you dumb creature, and I will not be bullied by A." Now let's go ahead and turn those keys back on, right? Because now we're going to jump up here to, let's just grab, what's this? Take those keys there, copy and paste them. I've now pasted them here. Until he basically gets to puny human, which are now going to be these keys, copy and paste, so no movement. So watch now.
You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature. I will not be bullied by you. Puny god.
Right? And then at the end, I could add my puny god. But I'm kind of creating that artificial camera shake that we associate with things. All right, so great. We've got the audio, right? We've broken it up into our different pieces. I know I didn't finish it all. I still got this, puny god at the end. But you get the idea if I were to keep going. I only have a few more little parts to deal with. But for the most part, I'm done. Now, to turn this in, or to complete it, right now, it has just been saved as, right, an After Effects file. This is, maybe I'll go with part 03. But the After Effects file is empty. I know it doesn't seem like it, but everything is linked into an After Effects file. It's not embedded. So if you give me an After Effects file, it will be empty. I will literally get errors that'll say unable to locate media. And that's because they may have come from a folder. But that's why I made the point is when you do this, put them in a proper folder. But when you're done, it's time to submit this or turn it. We have to essentially think of almost like baking it in an oven. So first thing you want to do is make sure you're on your last and final composition version. You want to make sure you're in that version, not one of these prior ones. And we're going to go to File, Export, Add to Media Encoder Queue. And this is going to load up the Adobe Media Encoder. So again, it's another software to download. There is an Add to Render Queue option in the composition. But the render queue is built in After Effects, and it does not have all the proper video codecs. It's very limited. So here's our media encoder, right? And if you give it a second, it's going to pop up right here because it's making a dynamic server connection with the Adobe. It'll pop up here, and then all we have to do is verify our formats. Now, see, it just popped up. Now, it makes very clear that I want this, right? It is a 1920 1080 HD 2997 MPEG-4 H.264 compression. Well, that's pretty easy to figure out. First thing we do is click on the first option. Now, if you're on a Mac, this first option usually is QuickTime. If you're on a PC, usually that first option is AVI. Once you start choosing the file type settings, it tends to hold on as a favorite. Now, I can come over here and I can double check beginning to end, right? Come over to the format, make sure we choose H.264 right there. Presets. Now, match high source bit rate means it's going to match what we worked with in After Effects. These are all the different other types. So again, if you needed to export this as a high quality 1080, you could do it there. If you needed a Twitter 1080 or a Facebook 1080, you can see all these different settings. Just make sure though that you are matching the source and that it does say here 1920 1080. See, or it says right here 1920 1080. Make sure you also go to output name, because it does not know where to save this right now. Okay, so I can go to Motion Graphics, Kinetic Type, and I can give it your last name, right? Assignment 1 or, right? Right? Last name assignment 1, or you could say Kinetic Type, hit save. But it's not the word last name, it's your last name. And then finally, just to kind of show you some cool stuff that exists in here, just for the sake of it, there are cool things to add here in the media encoder. I can do a lumetri color change here if I want to. See? And change the whole color style. See, matrix blue. And now you see everything's going to have a blue tint to it. Film noir, black and white. I can make changes here. I can put an image overlay. I can do a name overlay. I can do a time code overlay. Time tuner. There's a lot of cool things that we can add in the media encoder itself. I can even come over here and publish it directly to the cloud, Behance, Facebook, a server, Twitter, Vimeo. So media encoder is pretty damn cool because you can actually do all this work in the media encoder itself, not even having to upload Premiere Pro or After Effects. When it's all said and done, we hit OK. Nothing is happening until we hit the green arrow. Now you're going to see encoding, and it shows you the progress of encoding your project. We'll just let that finish. While that's finishing up, believe it or not, I can come back and keep working. Or, in this case, I'm going to demonstrate new project, just to get a new project here. But We've been working now for almost 2 hours, and watch if I can go to edit, purge, all memory and disk. Now, if I'm completely done with that project and I don't need to keep working on it on my machine, then I can go and purge my memory and disk cache. It says clear disk cache. How much would I be saving? 16.5 gigabytes of memory. So just in the hour and 30 minutes that we've been working on this one project, After Effects has eaten 16.5 gigabytes of my computer's memory in the ability of playing back real time. So if I'm all done with that, I don't need to go revisit it, and I don't need to keep working. I can clear that cache. If you're going to keep working, don't clear the cache, because you may go back and want to do it. But that's something that in After Effects, very few students remember. And you'll end up one day being like, where's all my memory? I don't understand. I have no memory left. It's because After Effects has actually stored that for you. And that's the great thing about After Effects, because it can do that, but it's also the problem with After Effects, because it does that. Because, Premiere Pro does not do that. It doesn't eat your memory for you. Okay, let's see here. I think it's done. I can clear my cache. Okay. And let's take a look and see what my final version is. Here it is here.
You all of you beneath me.
Let's see this one.
You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dumb creature. I will not be bullied by you. Here we go.